Hi, my name is Olga Lucia Torres, and I'm Board Vice Chair of the Multicultural Media and Correspondence Association. We thank you for joining us during these difficult times. MMCA is leading a growing call to action to increase diverse ownership and control of the reporting, creation, production, and distribution of news and stories on all platforms. The five key pillars of our effort are: one, building a community that fosters connection and collaboration; two, advocating for greater public and political awareness and support; three, facilitating constructive engagement with and between policymakers and industry leaders around consensus based solutions; four, helping to secure financial, technical, and other resources for media stakeholders of color; and five, showcasing and honoring multicultural excellence. I am proud to share this recap of our effort to date.
We see a media diversity crisis with serious economic, social, and political implications. 40% of the population have no ownership in an industry that represents 20% of the economy. Media bias and stereotyping is fanning the fire of hatred and division. Dying local news outlets are crippling civic engagement. And worst of all, not seeing positive stories about their community is stifling the dreams and aspirations of Black and brown children across this nation.
We hosted the inaugural Multicultural Media Correspondence Dinner to ignite a call to action to move the needle on media diversity.
We don't just tell colored stories. We tell stories in color.
During the dinner, we honored multicultural media luminaries who all shared their struggles and highlighted the need for increased media diversity.
Not enough to shore. It takes money, it takes capital. It has to be multicultural. It has to be people coming together.
There's no way to create that cultural change without the authentic voices.
Stories of multicultural people have tremendous value.
In order to harness and sustain the energy and power of the MMCD, we formed the Multicultural Media Correspondence Association, and it quickly became a powerful platform. MMCA serves as a trusted bridge and convener, enabling difficult, solutions-focused conversations in a common ground environment. It serves as a vehicle to provide thought leadership. It effectively influences and communicates policy developments.
You have to just go at it as if you have the same rights that everyone else has to do what you need to do to fulfill your dream.
And it provides information and resources for both individuals and stakeholder organizations. Most notably, MMCA has worked with Representative Demings to introduce resolutions that reaffirms Congress's support for media diversity. We ask that journalists and media professionals join our community and become diversity champions, and that media companies and stakeholder groups become strategic partners by providing funding and support. Together, we can move the needle on media diversity. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to introduce our co-founder and president, David Morgan. I met David at Cornell University. At the time, I was the activist, leading protests and marching, and David reluctantly joining in. Then he went off to Harvard Law School, did the obligatory thing, and practiced law in a very prestigious manner, I may add. He even got an LLM in taxation from Georgetown University Law Center, but he found his way back to activism. I was excited when he reached out to see if I would be on the board of MMCA. He saw a crisis of media diversity with serious economic, social, and political implications that was not being adequately addressed. Would I join him in this crusade? Yes, I answered. Here's David.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. As you know, who owns the story controls who wins and loses. And I think with the momentum we have, I'm excited that I think we will have a chance to win. I'm also really want to take the time to thank our dynamic board and as well as our advisory board, who has really leaned in to sort of make sure MMCA is successful. I also want to thank our awesome partners who have been in this media diversity struggle for some time, and many have been acting even without sort of the fanfare they deserve, but their work is so incredibly critical. I finally want to thank our media partners for this solution series today, Verizon Media and Yahoo News. We are more than excited to have them be a part of this effort. And finally, I would love to introduce our moderator and my friend, Ramses Jean-Louis, who is the Global Head of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging for Verizon Media. Ramses, thank you for what you're doing and for Verizon Media's support of MMCA and for leaning into this very important conversation.
Thank you, David. We are very happy and very excited about our partnership with MMCA, and I am happy to be the moderator for tonight's panel. We do recognize that this is a very trying time for all of us. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and a lot of fear that's permeating throughout the country. I'd like to start off by reading a statement that we have. Social justice is core to who we are as Verizon Media. The racial inequality, violence, and oppression against the Black community must stop now. Our brand purpose is to move the world forward. We are committed to helping ensure we move it forward for everyone. I am happy that we are here today with such an esteemed panel. I would like to actually take the time to introduce this panel and to thank them all for making the time to be here to engage in this conversation. We have Professor Eddie Glaude Jr., who is the chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. We have Hetty Tripp, co-facilitator of anti-racism workshops, St. Cloud State University. And we have Roy Austin, former White House Deputy Assistant to the President, Office of Urban Affairs under President Obama. Thank you all for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
I'd like to start off with a moment of silence for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. Thank you. So I would like to begin this conversation. We'll start with Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. first. How did we get here? How did we find ourselves here today? What were the drivers, the underlying drivers that contributed to this racial tension and these murders that we've witnessed?
Well, we've seen, thank you for inviting me and asking me to be a part of this important conversation. I want to thank Brother David and Sister Olga and the MMCA for all the important work that you guys do. I think we got here very, very straightforward. We have an epidemic of police brutality. We have a criminal justice system that is overrun by racial bias. There's a sense in which our communities of color are over-policed and underprotected. We live in a country in some ways that's organized along the view that some people are valued because of the color of their skin more than others. And then that translates in how the country is organized at the political level, at the social level, and the economic level, and how communities are policed. And so what we know is that daily, there's violence happening in our communities, and then every now and then it bubbles up and someone is dead. So this is accumulated grievance. This is how we got here, accumulated grievance.
Thank you, Eddie. Roy, would you like to add to that?
I think the professor absolutely nailed it. I think that the problem is that we've had a huge lack of accountability on the part of law enforcement. For the last 5 years, 10 years, approximately 1,000 people are killed every year by police officers. And it's become something that we've just kind of accepted. That's the number it's going to be, and we haven't done anything about it. And I think that we are where we are right now because people are finally fed up. And then we had the images, and we have this collective kind of feeling that nothing is going to change under the current administration, that any progress that was made under the past administration. Then you just have an image of a completely innocent person being held down and killed for 9 minutes, having a knee on his neck. And so finally, I think it just bubbled over. I think that we are now in a place where everyone is demanding change, and we're seeing a multicultural group of protesters out there that are looking at what is happening here and saying it is not right and it cannot go on.
Thank you. Hetty, please, we'd like to know your thoughts.
We have to remember that throughout American history, since the 1660s, the US government created institutions that maintained white supremacy and white privilege. And this includes the criminal justice system. So you have to attack the systemic racism that's within our systems and institutions to make change.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. That's actually a very good point. Racism overall. Earlier today, we had a meeting with our editorial team just to talk about racism and what is the best way from a media perspective to cover racism and to talk about it. Eddie, can you shed a little bit of light just historically in terms of what role has slavery played? And again, when you take a look at where we are, unfortunately, I vividly remember the stories of Abner Louima and Amadou Diallo, and that was over 20 years ago. Why is it that we keep repeating the same conversations? There's shock and then there's outrage. Why is it that it's something that keeps coming up over and over again?
Right. So I think Eddie hit it right on the head, right? I mean, our society is organized in light of a set of assumptions about who's valued and who's not. And we need to understand that has a long history. I mean, let's first begin that this is a settler colonial state, right? We come in, the way the United States is formed is by assuming, taking over land and literally wiping out people, right? And then there's a way in which the country reconciles its commitment to democracy with the institution of slavery, and how the legacy of slavery overdetermines so much of what we do and what we've done. That's what the 1619 Project was trying to, I think, in its own way, demonstrate how slavery and its afterlife continues to reverberate throughout the society. Now, I think it's important for us to understand that we're on this racial hamster wheel, as it were, because we have yet to come to terms with who we actually are. We keep dealing with the illusion of America as the shining city on the hill, the illusion of America as an example of democracy already achieved. And so when we have these moments of eruptions, folk clutch their pearls and say, oh my God, is this America? And they do it every single time, right? And so part of what we have to do in this moment is insist on an honest reckoning, right? Because each generation has to deal with it. Now, let's just think about this really quickly, Rand. So there are 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds out in the street. Think about how old they were in 2014 when folk were in the streets in Ferguson. And think about what we experienced. Ferguson with 400 days of protest in interesting sorts of ways that jumped off and popped off at different levels of intensity. Some of these folk were 16, 15, 14 years old, right? Just in 2014. And now, and that was in the context of President Obama, of having the first Black president. And then what happened between 2014 and 2020? Police kept killing us. Even with COVID-19, the number of police incidents and deaths in March 2020 surpassed the number of police deaths in March 2019. They're still killing no matter the pandemic, you see. So part of what this involves is an honest confrontation with who we are so that we can open up space to imagine ourselves differently. That's a hard task. And that's what we have to do as we curate conversations to get us to that core problem.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for unpacking that. And you mentioned a very, very good point that a lot of homes and households are struggling with now, that I know that I'm struggling with here with my own family, in terms of having that conversation with your children. And it's such a nuanced conversation in terms of, we want to keep them safe, we want to protect them, but we need them to remain vigilant. We're telling them that they have to keep their eyes open. You have to have a set of eyes behind your head. You have to be aware of where you are and how you're carrying yourself. And you have to speak politely, make sure your hands are always in clear sight. But yet at the same time, you don't want them to be angry. You don't want them to be fearful, because that could backfire and you'll have the opposite effect. What guidance can we give? What guidance can we provide? And Roy, we'll start with you. What guidance can we provide to homes in terms of, how do you have these conversations? How do you talk about this with your children? And what is our hope for the future in terms of children growing up having to witness and to see this?
So my wife and I are very big advocates of just honesty. And unfortunately, we have to just have these honest conversations, because if we sugarcoat this in any way, shape, or form, then our kids are going to walk into an environment that they're not going to be prepared for. And it's a hard conversation to have with kids. It's a hard conversation to have with these young people, but I got to tell you, they see it. They read about it, they see it, social media. I mean, TikTok is talking about what happened to George Floyd. Instagram is talking about what happened to Breonna Taylor. So they see it, and so if they don't hear the truth from their parents, then they're going to get it some other way. And then the thing is to prepare them for it. Unfortunately, you have to prepare your sons primarily for how to try to be the ones who de-escalate every situation that they step into, because it's not a fair fight, a grown or a young man against a police officer. You're gonna have to save your fight for another time. We have to teach our girls, our Black girls, that they're going to be looked at differently. They're going to be looked at as being more mature. They're going to be looked at as being angry, and let them know that don't spend too much time worrying about how others look at you. You be the best you can possibly be. But then it's about media. How do we portray our Black boys and our Black girls and our Black men and our Black women in the media, so that when our children watch all of this media, they see people who they can look up to, and people who they can strive to be, and people who look like them doing great and fantastic things. But I got to tell you, in everything, in every conversation, especially in this day and age of the fake news, we as parents, friends, relatives of color have to be telling our children honest stories.
Thank you, Roy. I have a follow-up question for you. Having worked under the Obama administration, what was the general strategy that the Obama administration had for these types of cases?
So it's a bunch of different things. There are basically three mechanisms that we were using generally. So first, it's just the prosecution of the officers is the first question. Can you prosecute the officers, or can you help the state and local prosecute the officers? And that's dealing with the individual officer. The second piece of it is what we did with pattern and practice cases and consent decrees, We were in New Orleans and Seattle, right now in Baltimore and Chicago and in Ferguson. And that is whether or not you identify constitutional violations by the entire department that need to be looked at and fixed. And then finally, you had President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, which was doing an amazing job of changing policing around the country and getting people to look at it and really do a systematic check. What were they doing to eliminate the use of excessive force, and what were they doing to eliminate discriminatory policing, and what were they doing to make things better? And every single one of those things I just mentioned have been destroyed by the current administration. Not just step back, but flat out destroyed by the current administration. And I think that's why, that's part of why the fire that you see right now. Not only did they destroy those pieces of government that were working on these things, whether it be from school discipline to how we deal with reentry, but on top of that, you just have the bullying and the constant demeaning of people of color and LGBT individuals. I think that is the problem that we've seen here, is the progress that we felt we were making, where police departments were asking applicants for chief, what are you going to do to institute the ideas of the task force on 21st century policing, has now disappeared into a conversation of how can you be law and order. And that's the problem.
Thank you, Roy. Hetty, I would love to get your thoughts and your insight in terms of, what is the role of the ally? And we talked about the conversations that's taking place within the African-American community and within the household, but we know that this conversation is taking place in many households. How is the best way to facilitate these conversations and to build trust among different communities?
Well, let me bring you to my household, which is, I am the wife and mother of a strong Black activists within a multicultural and multi-ethnic family. We have educated them from very young to be informed, to be politically and socially aware, to use critical thinking and analysis. And we need to use this current uprising. And my children are there. They're in South Minneapolis. They're in Uptown Minneapolis. I'm going there again tomorrow. We need to use this uprising as a critical change, a critical point, to amplify our messages, to amplify our voices from our communities, because it's not being heard. We are silenced because the dominant media coverage is biased. It does not give our stories. So I look to, your organization to be a catalyst for this. I probably didn't answer your question quite, but that is where my heart is.
No, absolutely, you did. And I also have a follow-up question for you as well. With regards to COVID-19, a lot of people use the phrase that we're all in it together. And it is true, we've learned that through that process that we are all very interconnected. Although we're all in it together, we're experiencing it differently. And we are very aware that the Asian community has undergone a tremendous amount of discrimination, targeting, and violence as well towards the Asian American community. And I would love to kind of hear your insights in terms of, how can we be strong allies to the community, and what steps can we take to ensure that we have justice in this arena as well?
Yeah, COVID-19 was an opportunity for certain factions within our community to again bring up anti-Asian sentiments. So it doesn't matter if you're Chinese or not, as long as you are perceived as Asian, as Chinese, you are discriminated against. It's an excuse. And I want to bring it though to the police force in terms of, we talk about the four policemen that were, now they're all charged with murder, but we must realize that a diverse police force does not address the inherent corruption of the criminal justice system. It doesn't matter what color the policeman is. They are going to be part of a system of police brutality and police profiling of Black men, of my husband, of my son, of my daughter, just because of the color of their skin, the broadness of their nose, the shape of their eyes, the thickness of their lips. Look at the picture of George Floyd. He is a beautiful black man, but he is my son, too. Again, I probably didn't answer you well. Oh, allies, yes. So as an organization, National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, we are in St. Cloud, Minnesota. We have very strong allies within the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. So this is based in St. Paul. We have rallied for Asians, for Black Lives. That was yesterday. Today, the South Asian community, no, I'm sorry, tomorrow, the South Asian community is going to be having a silent vigil. So we look for organized protests. We need them to be organized. We need them to include, the Asian community is vast. For example, we have the Hmong American Partnership as part of this. The Japanese American Citizens League is part of this. Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment, and the whole diaspora is part of this. So the more coalitions we have, the more committees we have, it will make us stronger. We are stronger because of that.
Yes, we are stronger together. And Eddie, I'd love to bring you in on this conversation as well in terms of, you know, the impact of COVID-19, how people are experiencing it differently, but also to the respect that there are some comments that this might be encouraging anti-police sentiment. How do we respond to that?
We ignore it. That's nonsense. I mean, why even spend time attending to that claim, right? When we are dealing with the fact that Hetty's son is making a choice, a decision to risk his life to go out and protest, her daughter making a choice. I mean, think about what's happening. When those folks are in the street across this country, they're making a decision to literally go out and risk their lives, not just simply to confront the repressive state apparatus that's called the police, but they're risking their lives in light of a global pandemic that's killing Black people disproportionately. Right? We're in a moment that is so unique. Some have said that it's this 1918 flu epidemic and 1929 Great Depression and 1968 urban unrest all rolled into one. And when we think about COVID-19, we're thinking about 40 million unemployed. We're thinking about Black people and brown people disproportionately impacted by the virus, not only in terms of rates of hospitalizations, but who dies. And when they're dying, we can't grieve with them. We can't give them the wake that they deserve, the funeral that they deserve. Wynton Marsalis's dad passed and they couldn't give him a second line parade in New Orleans. So we can't grieve properly. So the grief is overshadowed with regret, you see. So we're unemployed, we're losing our jobs, which rent relief is ending. Unemployment benefits, will they renew it? Right? While all these people are making billions, millions, and billions of dollars, you see. And in the midst of this, they kill us. And so part of the way in which we need to read, I think, these protests is that it's layered. It's layered. It's layered grief. It's layered grievance. And COVID-19 is not an event that's just going to pass. COVID-19 or the coronavirus will work like BCAD. It changes the periodization of how we think of American history. There was the moment before COVID-19 and then the moment after. And so part of what we have to do is to understand this as a conjunctural moment that's layered, that's full of crisis and possibility. And these young folk are out here trying to show us a pathway, right, to really reimagine America anew. And part of our task as media, I think, is to open up space for these new vocabularies to enter, for new languages to enter, so that we can reimagine ourselves, because folks are trying to pull us back to a sense of what they take to be normal, and then, how shall I say this really quickly, and then how can it displace all of our sins onto the monster that is Donald Trump? That's too easy. If we get Donald Trump out of office, that's not going to solve our problem. Period. So we have a lot of work to do in this moment that has opened up all sorts of grief and possibility.
So Eddie, I really like that analogy, the time before and the time after, and to really get to what's going to solve the problem. So, if we could get to the point of saying that there was the time before George Floyd, and then there was the time after George Floyd, how can we make this the Me Too movement for racial justice? And this is a question I want to open up to the entire panel, but I'll start with you, Eddie.
So let's be clear, the Me Too movement was engaged in enormous and extraordinary activity, Tarana Burke and others, before powerful white women took it up, right? So, and because you have powerful white women in powerful places and Pharaoh writing articles on this, we saw movement. But we want to lift up Tarana Burke and all of these women, Black women and women of color, who were engaged in the Me Too movement prior to it coming into view. So I think the interesting thing that we have to so the question is not how do we become Me Too? The question is, for me, Ram, is how do we exemplify a kind of radical progressive politics that's evidenced among everyday ordinary people, pushing against a certain economic philosophy, a certain set of political elites that are content with exploiting everyday ordinary people while they hoard the benefits of the society, if that makes sense. In other words, we need a robust movement among everyday ordinary people, a push from below that will change the very nature of the society. And then maybe we can generate our own political elites out of that, as opposed to waiting for them to guide us and to change. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm rambling.
No, it does make sense. And I want to know, how do we put together that army and that arsenal to have that robust movement? And I will turn it over to Hetty, actually, so that you can share your insight in terms of, how do we make that possible? How do we move in that direction? How do we make sure that this time is going to be different than the other times where we've had just conversation and talk for change?
What I've been seeing in Minneapolis is that neighborhoods have been coming together to help. So this is trust building within a neighborhood. I've seen white, black, brown people carrying brooms and wheelbarrows and buckets to clean up the mess. Anything. My grandson brought some food to the food drop. He's 4.5. That message is there. There are organizations that are coming together. Again, I stress it has to be organized. It can't be just a wild protest. It has to be organized. This, again, is trust building. So we can use these building blocks: neighborhood, city, town, state, nation, global. That is one way to go. But our voices are still not being heard, is a constant mantra I bring to this group. We have to hear out. I hear so many stories, and you can only, it's hard.
Thank you, Hetty. And I'd like to, our next question is going to be, how do we pivot? What is the road forward, and what role does media play? But I would like to give Roy an opportunity to respond to, what are we going to do different to make sure that this will be the moment that will change moving forward?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to make this moment different, because we've had these moments before. After Michael Brown and Ferguson, we thought we had this moment. And we started moving forward, and next thing we know, we are electing Donald Trump president, which is stunning. But America has been about huge forward leaps followed by backpedal. And I just hope that we can keep our foot on the pedal, moving this forward, and not simply fall back into our normal routine once we have a chance to do so. And it is incumbent upon all of us, and it's incumbent upon the media to continue to tell the stories of change that is happening around the country, if in fact it is happening. But the complacency is kind of our resting spot. And in complacency, there are more Black lives that are lost. And again, every single year for the last 10 years, 1,000 to 1,100 lives have been lost at the hands of police. We still haven't done anything seriously about that. So it's time that we do that.
Sure. So what is the role, before we open it up to Q&A, and we're going to open up to Q&A because we want to make this interactive and hear from the audience, what is the role of diverse media, and what role should media play in making sure that we elevate the voices of these underrepresented communities? I'll start with you, Eddie.
Well, first of all, we have to leverage our platforms so that those stories can get heard. We bring a different kind of perspective. We have to be truth tellers when we get the mic. We have to do that. We have to be that. And then we need to direct our attention to providing space for different kinds of conversations and voices to enter into the public view. There's a kind of curatorial work that we have to do as media folk, right? And that is not only to bring different voices, but also to bring a different kind of bibliography into the public domain so that people can start hearing and thinking about matters differently. I've been thinking, for example, how long did it take the abolitionist movement to introduce a certain kind of language into the political discourse? How long did it take the Black freedom struggle of the mid-20th century to introduce a certain kind of way of thinking about citizenship, a certain way of thinking about the moral character of democracy, right? So part of our work, I think, as at least I see part of my work as an academic, as an intellectual who does media. I want to be very clear. I'm a pundit, right? So I just run my mouth in some ways, is to create a different kind of framing that then points the camera in a different direction. So if I frame the argument differently, right, then suddenly they have to move it, and then we're looking in a different direction. So I'm always thinking about how can I reframe this in a way that shifts that point of view, the angle, and then suddenly different people are coming into view, different thoughts and subject matters are coming into view. And that's what I see my role as an intellectual who happens to have a public mic, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Thank you, Eddie. Hetty?
You talk about diverse media, so I want to be really clear that diverse media does not mean tokenism. I don't want to hear, people of color or non-white people. I wouldn't say people of color because that's a political term, but I don't want them there espousing the dominant view. So diverse media must be informed. They must be politically and socially aware, out of the box thinking, as Dr. Glaude said, but also to use critical thinking and analysis. And the thing is, we have so much rich resources in our communities to be able to do that. Yeah. We have them. And then to Mr. Austin, there will always be pushback. That has happened from day one of the American history. There's pushback by the right, pushback by the left, sometimes getting in the middle, but there'll always be resistance one way or the other. And it's a continual struggle.
Yeah. And Roy, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I don't want to be facetious, but let's be honest about what diverse media means. Diverse media means a Black Latino man on CNN getting arrested. That was one of the earliest things that happened in this whole George Floyd movement that we're seeing. And that woke up a whole heck of a lot of reporters. And if he wasn't a Black Latino man who was treated so unfairly, so obviously, I don't know that our story is the same. Because I don't know that everybody would be reporting this thing and say, "Oh, wait, hold on. This is a educated Black man who hasn't done a thing, and they're locking him up for that." And so we have to be there. And then the other part of it is, there's so many different possible stories to tell here. Are we telling the story from the perspective of the police department? Are we telling the story from the perspective of the protest? Are we doing the story from the perspective of the business owner, whether that's a small Black business or a small white business? Are we telling the story from the perspective of what President Obama did versus what President Trump did? There are a lot of stories to be told here. And unless you have minority journalists and minority media covering these stories, they're stories that are going to be missed. And so that's why we have to be a part of this. And that's why we have to actually, in many ways, take over the storytelling, because we have to tell our own story.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for bringing that up. Watching that journalist get arrested while he was on air, showing his ID and doing everything right, was incredibly painful. And it really did contribute to that feeling of helplessness in terms of what direction we're going if this is the story that we're covering and you can watch a reporter get arrested on air. I'm going to jump to the Q&A. Hetty, this question is going to be for you. What do you say to people who say that it is not the media's job to shape the narrative, but only objectively report?
What you were saying earlier reminded me of during Vietnam and the reporters that were oppressed because they were reporting the truth. The media needs to speak the truth. That is what we need to have.
Next question is for you, Roy. How can the media be really objective when their job is to gain viewership and make money?
Well, the way it can be objective is really to look at some of the smaller pieces of media. Look at the undefeated. Look at BET and how BET grew for a long time. But there's also, look, there's money in what the guy from The Office just did a whole show on being happy, not to make a whole bunch of money on that. We haven't told the stories necessarily that are going to continue to make the money. And we don't know. We are relying on the old prescriptions for this is what people are going to watch. But we're going to learn differently if we actually go out there and do things differently, and we show different stories. And the media can certainly affect what is shown and what people will take in. And we know right now, from everything from Black Panther to Just Mercy, the Black stories actually do sell, and they do make money, and minority stories do sell and do make money. The problem was we weren't showing them for a very long time.
Thank you, Roy. Next question is for you, Eddie. Why are we not seeing more diversity in media, from reporters to editors to owners? What can we do to demand that change?
That's a big question. I mean, that question speaks to the society at large, right? Typically, we're not seeing a diverse media because the people who are doing the hiring aren't diverse. We're not seeing a diverse media because there's a kind of opportunity hoarding that happens in this society. And we got to just say what Ms. Tripp said earlier, right? White supremacy continues to organize every nook and cranny of this place. Some people will say it's a pipeline question. We know that's a lie. We know that's a lie, right? That there are Black and brown reporters, minority reporters, diverse reporters out there, journalists out there. It's just who comes into view, right? And we also know that there's a kind of shrinking media landscape that's happening, at least at least in traditional media, at the same time that there is a much more precarious media landscape in terms of online, folks could lose their jobs like that, and then you're only making a certain amount of money by producing art, getting paid per article and all a range of things that. So I think it's systemic assumptions about who is valued. I mean, it's just white supremacy to cut to the chase. So let me stop rambling again. It's getting late for me.
I don't think you're rambling at all. Thank you for all the pearls of wisdom and for unpacking a lot of these the pieces of nuggets and knowledge. Like to give you all an opportunity to just share closing remarks before we move to the next segment. Roy, I'd like to start with you.
Look, it has been known for a long time that the only way that change comes is to demand it. And what we are dealing with today, what we are seeing today, is hundreds and hundreds of years in the making. I mean, I think you started off this whole Q&A with a discussion about slavery. If you look right after slavery and what happened with Jim Crow, you look what happened after Jim Crow and what happened with the civil rights movement. These things take time, but there are movements, and we do move forward. But it's by those who demand change. And so I just ask that those who are listening here continue to demand change, continue to demand that things improve. And you may not see it instantaneously, but I promise you that every child who sees someone out there in the street protesting is going to take that to the next level the next time. It's going to push for even better situation for all of us. So, whether it happens in my lifetime or not, I don't know, but we're getting better, and we're going to get better, and we're going to continue to get better.
Thank you, Roy. Hetty, please.
I'm thinking of all the other George Floyds that were not caught on camera, that were killed by police brutality, by an institution that is so systemically racist. But we need to use this uprising in Minneapolis, around the nation, around the globe. We have to use this uprising as a building block. So a block, you build on it. It's not the only block. And we have to use that to be really unified. And I look to the media, especially alternative media, to bring our voices out there, maybe in smaller networks, but increasingly growing. I am an ocean woman. Singapore is surrounded by ocean. I am a global citizen. So I want to be part of creating social justice and racial equity from my very core and rippling out to those oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, Hetty. Thank you for those powerful words. Eddie?
In 1986, James Baldwin delivered a speech at the National Press Club. And he said something that constantly runs around in my head. And I want to read the quote really quickly. He says, "We are living in a world in which everybody and everything is interdependent. It is not white, this world. It is not black either. The future of this world depends on everyone in this room. And that future depends on to what extent and by what means we liberate ourselves from a vocabulary which now cannot bear the weight of reality. Our task, it seems to me, is to create the space for the generation, the production, the creation of new languages so that we can imagine ourselves and this country anew."
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you. I don't know what more I can add to that. This was a very illuminating panel and discussion. I really appreciate it. What I would say is similar sentiment, what I've been sharing with folks. I've been having conversations, and some folks have been telling me, they don't really know how to bring up the topic. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. And what I tell them is to say that, to express yourself, to say that you don't have words, but maybe perhaps share how you feel, how you wish you had words, how you wish you could help. For everyone that approaches me and want to have the conversation, I view them as being a part of the solution. And together we can build that army that can really harvest and amplify and make the change that we're all looking for. So again, thank you all, Dr. Eddie Glaude, Roy Austin, Ms. Hetty Tripp. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Now we'll turn it back to David.
Ramses, thank you so much for leading this incredible discussion. And most I want to highlight, I think it's just amazing that you and Verizon Media is willing to have the discussion about what corporate media can do to increase diversity so that we can address these social problems. I want to pivot to our Unsung Hero segment. One of the most amazing things that I enjoy about our platform is for us to highlight multicultural media excellence. We've had the opportunity through our annual dinner to honor folks such as Kathy Hughes, Tom Joyner, Armstrong Williams, Ben Chavis, who are all giants in media and have just contributed so much to the economy. Today, I have the privilege of offering to you this week's Unsung Hero, James O. Goodwin. Now, if folks don't know, Mr. Goodwin is the family founded the Oklahoma Eagle Publishing Company, which was established in Tulsa, Oklahoma after the Black Wall Street massacres. This venerable newspaper that's been around since then still is leading the effort to make sure the voice and the Black publishers are bringing news to our communities. Mr. Goodwin, it's so awesome to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for
the invite. No, thank you. I want to take we have about 5 minutes, but I really want to get your insights. We've had this incredible discussion. As you know, 50 years ago, during the Kerner Commission report, when we were going to a similar situation of social unrest, the media was implicated. And I would love to get your take on what do you see as the proper role of media in this context?
Well, particularly from our point of view, we have historically had to fight the battle of all the issues that your panelists have just discussed. And we have been sometimes a voice in the wilderness, but we have always stood for those people who have been trodden on, mistreated, who, it's been characterized that we went from a community that was prosperous, one of the most prosperous in the country, to one that does not have the same prosperity. And it was destroyed simply by white racism. And we have still contend with that issue today. And so we as a newspaper believe that it's important to write about and bring to bear our position on issues of poverty and deserts that are food deserts, on the lack of employment and lack of income and capital for prosperity for other businesses. I mean, that fight, Tulsa is a microcosm of what's going on in the United States today. And we as a publication write about those issues that the Metropolitan Press will not touch. The Metropolitan Press seems to be much more content with the status quo. And so we have historically and will continue, even as we make our transformation from the print to electronic, to speak to these issues. And I've just been privileged to be able to do that over the years. It has not been without great sacrifice, but it's more important for us to have a voice for those people who don't have a voice. And that's what our newspaper stands for.
Okay. Before I sort of get into what could the major media companies do to help multicultural media, I want to ask you, intimated that there is a gap between your view of sort of the media's role, the mainstream media, and sort of what they're actually doing. Could you sort of shed some light on what do you see are the things that mainstream media is not doing with regards to covering and being a resource to communities of color?
Well, there are a couple of answers to that. major media will not pay attention to some little Johnny who was a football star at some local school if it's in a black predominantly black community. Our stories that really not told. Plus, the stories that are told are not oftentimes accurately told. So, our purpose as a press is to tell our stories from our perspective, and that can't be done by the Metropolitan Press. I don't want to say it's racist, but by the sheer nature of what they do not give us the kind of exposure by way of encouraging kids that they too are American and they too can succeed. I think one of our editors years ago never liked to think in terms of poverty, although that term is frequently used. His attitude was, "I'm not poor, I'm broke," and it's from that point of view that our newspaper seems to write, "You can do it," notwithstanding the adversity. Tulsa is unique and can be a model because against all the odds, it prospered. It was a victim of Jim Crow, just like the other places in the country. But we were able to succeed because we had land. The story of Oklahoma really can't be told unless you talk about slavery, unless you talk about the Indian Removal Act and the Indian Allotment Act. African Americans had over 3 million acres of land. And as a result of that, had mineral interests, were able to farm the land, which gave rise to Booker T. Washington characterizing Greenwood as being the Black Wall Street. But all that was destroyed out of sheer jealousy. And yet we rebuilt ourselves. And so our function is to continue with this message that you guys have been talking about here today in the panel discussion. This business of, but we tend to talk about it too in terms of right and wrong. I mean, when you see your fellow citizen being mistreated, that's what I think galvanized with the George Floyd incident. People saw that what happened was wrong, was mean, was evil, and that caused reverberation across that world. In India and in France, all people are they feel outraged because of this conduct that's going on. And so we like to write about things like that in order to bring attention to the people that we are human beings, and people see that humanity. And I think really black folks in this country, we are the moral force. We give this country an opportunity to get itself right. And I think our newspaper and whether it's on electronic media or print, needs to keep that message ongoing. As it turns out, we are, I think, provide the moral force. Trump is just a symptom of the underbelly of America. And he's not the cause of it, he is a product of it. But I think us seeing the underbelly is going to help us rectify directly as a group of people, black and white, to rectify those things that are wrong in our society.
One last question. The other major impact we're seeing is from the COVID-19 virus and epidemic, and we've talked about the disproportionate impact on communities of color. Publishers of color are actually part of that, and as we know, there's facing an existential threat. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how the pandemic has impacted you and the larger newspapers of color? And we have wonderful listeners and corporations that are looking for ways they can help. So if you can sort of tell, what are you experiencing and how can we help?
Well, in that regard, we are looking for, because we have this amazing platform with the net now, we're asking for more subscriptions to sustain our existence. We currently are, because of the virus, participating in a donation for the maintenance of the press. In Tulsa, particularly, we, contrary to what's going on with the rest of the world, the percentage of of African Americans who have contracted the virus is not the same proportionally as it is in the rest of the country. But we will need continued participation and investment in our enterprise for those who want to see and hear the untold story that the Metropolitan Press does not cover, whether it's electronic or print. There's such a desperate need for that, and the Oklahoma Eagle has, over the years, been right in the thick of trying to bring change, positive change, in a way that's built upon the principles of faith, hope, and charity. This whole business of the mistreatment of people, we can't treat that kind of evil with evil, and we have to find ways to reconcile, to conciliate, because that's really the true way we're going to prosper as Americans. That we, as Dr. King would said, we either will live together as brothers or we'll die as fools. And so we never take the posture of trying to preach about hate or anger, but we do talk about what's wrong and how to rectify it.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I'm happy to report this is only the second in a series of discussions where we'll continue to explore the topic, and we will end up with some concrete consensus-based solutions to address the lack of diversity in media. I ask that you continue to check us out and follow us at MMCA DC. And thank you again to Verizon Media and Yahoo News for partnering with us on this series. Thank you, everyone.